Welcome everybody. We're going to get it kicked off here right at 12. We're on time, we're in the military. Welcome. It's the 46th Annual International Saxophone Symposium. We're glad you all can make it. And we're going to make sure that you have all the information. It's either on the QR code on the program or you can find it on our website. If you just Google Davey Band Saxophone Symposium, it'll come right up. But there are QR codes in all the programs as well and posted around in other places that are common areas. Make sure to come to the concert tonight if you can. It's at 8 o'clock right here in the main hall. Commodores are tomorrow night at 8 o'clock as well. And I'll turn it over now to Yvette Saka.
Hello. So my lecture today is on flute music for soprano saxophone. I'm looking to fill the gap of the 17th and 18th century, 19th century music that soprano and saxophone largely does not have due to the instrument not existing at this time. So a little background about me. I got my bachelor's in music at Manhattan School of Music and my master's in music at Rutgers University, both with Dr. Paul Cohen, who's in the audience with us today. And I'm pursuing my DMA in saxophone performance and my MA in musicology at Rutgers University as well. Some of the questions that I really wanted to look at in this lecture is what makes a good transcription? Why do I want to specifically look at flute music? And why is it important to close the gap of repertoire missing from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries? Finding and creating a successful transcription or arrangement requires many different considerations, as we all probably know. I know we've all probably played transcriptions before. Who here has made their own transcriptions or arrangements of music? Yes, yes. Okay, yeah. So lots of things that you have to think about, but I think the first thing I often think about is key. Is the key going to stay good if I keep it in the key that has been written in the concert pitch, or do I need to adjust the key to make it significantly more playable on the saxophone? Yes, we can play in all 24 keys, but many keys are much easier than others, and there's some things you don't think about being difficult that become difficult if you are not considering key carefully. Range is also important, depending on the experience level. Obviously, a very, very virtuosic soprano player who go all the way up to altissimo D and C is not going to care as much about playing a Prokofiev flute sonata, but similarly, a student who's maybe a senior or even a graduate student would find this much more difficult to accomplish successfully. So range is also very important. And flute music offers pedagogical and performance opportunities not found in other instruments. I find that the flute and the saxophone are ergonomically and tonal concept-wise very alike, more similar than probably any of the other instruments besides possibly oboe. I think that many of the transcriptions we do from string instruments include techniques that we can't do, such as double stops and pizzicato, range that is far wider than we can do, both low and high. And other instruments such as brass, like trumpet, are fundamentally different in the way that they produce sound and the way that they interpret and express music than we do in our woodwind families. So, looking now into some actual music, I wanted to separate this into Baroque, classical, and Romantic music. My first example from the Baroque is the Telemann Fantasias without bass. He wrote 12 excellent little one-movement fantasias to our eyes. They're played attacca through all of the tempo changes, and they're unaccompanied without bass, so solo soprano music. I think that many of these works offer opportunities for students and performers to experiment with these Baroque concepts in a more fundamental and less superfluous way. The music is not as complex as Bach's. That does not make it worse. It's just not as complex as Bach's. So we're allowed to go into finer details of what is articulation, what are note groupings, what are fundamental aspects of meter, style, and expression that we can really pull out of this music to then apply to Bach, and then largely to our 20th century music that we find by Custon, Haydn. So I'm going to play some of this for you now. This example shows note grouping pairings, how even though we're in 3/4, many times we are in 6/8, 3/4, 1. There are many different types of rhythm pairings within this. can see how we're constantly going between different meters, and we have to really showcase those types of things to make it effective. The next type of thing that I want to show from Baroque music is opportunities for improvisation and freedom. I've been doing a lot of research into performance practice from the Baroque for my musicology work, and I've noticed that of a lot of the different styles and periods of music, Baroque music actually probably offers some of the most freedom to the performer out of anything that really came past it. We've always constantly constricted the performer more in benefit of the composer and what they want, but during the Baroque, all of this was left up to the performer. We could make our own choices of articulations. We could decide that we want to change the music and play other things that are not necessarily written. I think that these things allow for students to have a lot more excitement towards learning Baroque music. If you don't approach it as, well, no, you're not allowed to do anything, instead you're allowed to say, well, you're allowed to do anything set within these parameters, which we always do as teachers for our students. So I think this type of music is really, really great. It also shows the importance of these repeats in Baroque music that we often just see as passé and a little bit extending the music for no reason. Back in the Baroque, often you would play it through the first time as it was written, especially for something faster like this. And on the second time through, you would include improvisations, differences of articulation, differences of style. This is a much bigger difference in interpretation than just doing like a dynamic shift, which is pretty weak, actually, considered in the Baroque. Just changing from a forte to a piano or piano to a forte, they consider this a weak contrast in comparison to deciding to do a turn or adding in mordents and trills and different things like that. So I'll play a little bit of this, and I'll do the first repeat only so that you can show, you can see some of the improvisatory things. And you can even do much more, much less. It's all very much up to the performer and the student. Okay. I next want to go to the Fantasia number 8, which is in E minor. I believe that all of these pieces work for professional and for student performing. But I wanted to kind of play a larger section of the Fantasia so that you could really understand how this music is operating on a grander scale through each movements. So for this one, I'll be playing a little bit of each movement. I believe that these all offer very foundational exercises that we see in our more advanced music that we approach in our junior and senior year of college. Music like the Bach Partita in A minor, the Crescent sonatas, Haydn sonata, Ducrot, all of these types of things can be found within this if we look closely. Next excerpt, we can see how we can create many different articulation groupings and patterns, which is left largely up to the performer. that creating these articulation pairings is a lot of fun and can really, really have a lot of interest for students. And lastly, for the Fantasias, we can see these different note groupings again, but this time I would say it's a lot more aggressive in how he's displacing the meter. This largely doesn't feel like it's in 3/4. If you play like it's in 3/4, it's not really going to sound nearly as enjoyable or dancey. You lose a lot of the dance qualities and rhythms. Okay. So moving on to Bach's flute music. Bach has 7 flute sonatas, one of which is a little bit iffy on the interpretation, but we mostly accept it, which all would work very, very well for soprano saxophone if they were not in the keys that they were in. Almost all of them are really not great the second you transpose it up one whole step, because Baroque music doesn't, it's all written very ergonomically because they had to back then. So the second you start changing things outside of their keys, it gets very messy when you're not a keyboard player, essentially. So for my solution to these Bach pieces, I think that we have to largely make piano transcriptions. We play the flute part in the key that it is, so this is the E minor flute sonata, so we would play the D minor flute sonata, with us playing in our key of E minor. This, to me, allows us to keep all of the same beautiful ergonomic matches that the flute has to the soprano saxophone, although it creates, I would say, about triple the work on us as a transcriber or an arranger to be able to play it. I think the investment of this time and this energy is genuinely extremely important. I have done it both ways, and I can say that it was wildly more successful when I chose to just pick it in the more ergonomical key and take the triple the amount of work, because it just made a better performance. So I'll play a little bit, actually a great example for this. The first note that we start on would be a C sharp. I don't think anyone wants to just start on a C sharp to play beautiful Bach music. It just doesn't feel right. So I'll play some things from this note as well. One extra thing that's very lovely is Baroque music, flute music, doesn't go up really largely past a G. They did not have that range within their instrument very well back then. So if you don't take it up a whole step, then almost all of the music from the Baroque is approachable with a G key soprano or with a very, very dedicated student who wants to learn how to use front G and stuff on soprano saxophone as well. G is definitely not a wildly crazy note on the soprano saxophone anymore. Gorgeous, I think, on the soprano saxophone, and it fits really, really well within our own range of ergonomics. And next I'm going to play this little excerpt here with the high G unit. see, that is not a G that you are allowed to smack. You have to really be very pretty going up to it. And it's difficult. You will have to do a full octave leap, but there's a lot of time to approach it. And it's giving the student a really, really nice fundamental opportunity to approach using a pretty G in their soprano playing instead of just a G. Okay. Next, I want to play some excerpts from the second movement, which I think has 3 really great technical understandings for soprano saxophone players to understand different methods of the different ways in which the instrument is being used in association with an accompaniment part. We see at the beginning, we play the theme, and then at measure 8-ish, we're playing a lot of flourishy type of fast note runs, but we need to make sure none of these are hit too much, and we're really allowing the line to flow. And then we have moments such as here, which are largely accompanying, where we and the harpsichord are really just exchanging this flow of chords. There's no real melodic material here. All of these have to be approached differently, and if you play them all like you are the solo part, you're not going to make it sound very Baroque or effective in general. It will not sound very nice overall. So I'll play some of these different sections for everyone. I'm really not trying to play it like a flute. I actually try and play it like a mix between a Baroque oboe and trumpet, because I think that the sound really works well there. But when I go to this more improvisatory section around measure 17, or more accompanying section around 17, I do try and play it a lot more connected and flowy like a we have to play with a lot more smoothness between our lines to be able to accomplish this. And we see here, at the end, when the theme comes back, it really allows for unambiguous return of theme and meter and these types of things. I think that we largely play such complicated music in saxophone world that our students miss fundamental examples of these types of things happening because they really only show up in band, and the second they start playing real solo music, it's gone. Everything is the most complex web of themes and rhythms and meters that you've ever seen. And so I think that these more pared back examples that are still very quality music allow for us to really put into perspective for the students these theoretical concepts that they learn in class and approach them in interpretation. Okay. I'm going to only talk about the Partita in A minor. I think we all are aware of this piece as a piece for soprano saxophone. It's done very, very often. But I think that one thing that is missing from a lot of performances is a importance on performance practice, but not as a use of restriction, but as a use of freedom and expanding what we can do in saxophone. I think that we largely do not have to play this like a flute player. I don't think that's actually really all that important to the base consideration of whether or not this sounds good. I think the most important concepts are what is normal articulation style for the Baroque? What were the parameters? What was the length that you were allowed to end up at? What's the weight that you could end up at? These different things really influenced what flute players were doing back then, and most people were all trying to play in a more homogeneous type of way, I guess you could say back then. We are now, but I think we really allow for individual peculiarities to exist nowadays. Back then, a lot of things were a lot more umbrella towards things. So I would say that the missing thing for the flute partita is it's often played first as Baroque music, which it's one of the most difficult Baroque pieces probably ever written, especially for wind instrument solos. So we definitely should not be giving it to our youngest students who have not performed any Baroque music. we really should be looking at other examples by Telemann and Vivaldi, and approaching this much later when we actually have a good historical, stylistic understanding of what is Baroque music at this time. Without that, we kind of lose a lot of the important qualities that exist within this music. Okay. So now let's move to the classical. Does anyone know your Bümlein, Alle by Schubert? Is a song that he wrote, a very famous song. He uses it constantly in a lot of his music. You will probably recognize it when I start playing it. I think that theme and variation works are very important for students. It shows the compositional process really unlike any other type of work. It's very evident, the compositional process. You take a theme, and you do variations upon it, and you have to try and find the theme within all these variations and express the theme, and not let it get lost in all of the extra ornamentations that they add into it. So I believe that although this work is quite difficult, I wanted to give an example of a theme and variations work, especially by a composer like Schubert, because I think that saxophonists also miss out often on interacting with these masterwork composers who we learn about in our music history classes. I think this sometimes makes music history almost boring to a saxophonist because none of the music you learn for 3 semesters applies to you in any way, shape, or form, and then they give you like one aside in the 4th semester. But if we allow for some of this music to really enter our standard repertoire and our canon repertoire, then musicians no longer are like, oh, who's Franz? It's like, oh, the Franz violin sonata. I remember when I played that on saxophone. We should play it really, really well in saxophone, hopefully, but it's good that we can interact with this music and we know about it. Okay, so I'm going to play some of the theme and some of the first variation, and I'll show some of the things in the second, in the last part of the piece that I think are very interesting. Wow. It's a very, very virtuosic type of music, but definitely does not exit what is feasible for a soprano saxophone. And largely the range does not go above G sharp. I think there's a couple A's, but realistically nothing that's very, very crazy for a student who's really approaching altissimo seriously. I wanted to show these last few. Nope. Oh no, it's here. I'm one. These scalar sections here, I think, and on the last page they have scalar sections which are going up. It actually looks very similar to the music in the Crescent Concerto on the last page, and I think that in many ways, scales going up to long notes is one of the most common ending materials that composers use, and it's never a bad thing to do it again, necessarily. Alright, so the last piece that I want to show before my time is the Reinecke Undine Sonata. Mostly all I want to show here is the importance of key. The piece that I performed in the wrong key / the published key was this piece. and it is in F sharp minor. This is not the worst key of all time until you realize that in romantic music, going to the appoggiatura note, or the second, is very, very important for adding some oomph to the music, and he does it everywhere. Which means that the most common thing I had to do was a G sharp to F sharp slur, going from altissimo G sharp down to F sharp. They were everywhere. It was endless. It was really, really difficult to make that sound smooth in regard to instead just F sharp to F sharp to E natural. It was a lot harder to be able to get those types of fingerings in. And we can see in the second movement, what was a G natural is now an A. So we are now going way beyond what is on our fingering chart, and we are only doing altissimo notes, doing up very, very high. And we can see here on the last page during the most climatic section that we have to go up to C natural B sharps, which are largely not going to sound very nice on soprano saxophone after a certain point, especially when we have to constantly keep hitting them like we do in this. Even just lowering it a whole step will help genuinely a lot. A B natural, doable. An A sharp, doable. A C, a lot less doable when you have to play them endlessly. So that is my time. My future hopes are that performers will create thoughtful transcriptions, and that published versions of these will become more available so that we can really start canonizing these and standardizing this rep a lot more within our studios and stuff like that. And I hope to start publishing a lot of the transcriptions and arrangements that I've done. Yeah. If you have any questions, come up to me after while I'm packing up. Definitely can answer anything. You won't see me around much. I have to leave, unfortunately, for the rest of the conference. But if you have any questions, please come up and ask. Thank you.